Welcome back to my channel. I am so glad you're here, and we have a special guest with us today. This is Mark Minnella, that you've been hearing a lot about it because he is the author of The Wall Street Awakening, The Heart and Mind of Investing with Biblical Integrity. And if you are here for the first time, I will put a playlist in the description box down below so you can go back and watch all of the videos we've done in this series so far. My husband Jason
Hello.
And I have been going through this book. We've been going through the second half of the book. The first half is a wonderful devotional that you can go through with you and God. So today is a special day because we are going to be answering some of your questions. We're actually going to have to do this more than once because we had a lot of questions. So
okay,
we're going to go through half
sounds
of them
good.
today, which is wonderful. Oh, before we get started, I'm going to forget this. It was, let's see, every week we are giving away one copy of this book, and last week's winner was Simplified Mommy. That is the name of her account. So if you will email Jason
at integrityinvestors.com.
we will put your free book in the mail for you.
That's right.
You can receive that. We've already mailed out a couple of them.
One to Australia.
Yeah, I know. You're like surprised whenever
That's
Alex said,
awesome.
I'm in
Yeah,
school.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so your book is going all around.
right.
Also, if you want to purchase a copy for yourself and you haven't yet, you can get that on Amazon or thewallstreetawakening.com.
Yeah.
I will put all of the links I will put down in the description box so that you can look around there and help yourself to all the information. And also your firm. I put Integrity Investors, their website, all of that I put
Well, thank
as
you.
links.
I do want people to realize that all the proceeds, all the profits for the wallstreetawakening.com go to More Than Money Ministries to help people that are impoverished to be mentored out of poverty and into a lifestyle of giving.
That's good. I haven't mentioned that to them before.
I did once.
Thank you. I didn't pay attention. Yeah, that is great. So that's your non-for-profit
Right,
organization that you bless other people with.
correct. That's, hopefully it's the Lord's ministry, not mine, but yeah.
Right, for all good things. Okay, let's go ahead and get started on these questions. Our first question is from Susan. What is the biblical support for debt, if any, and what position does the book take on that, given the huge increase in more U.S. debt from COVID quarantine compensation?
Alrighty. Excellent question. Multiple questions, actually. Many different questions within a question. And by the book, I'm going to assume something I don't like to assume, but I mean the Bible. That's what I believe.
Actually,
That's
I
right.
don't. I think what she's saying, if I understand it correctly, is the book as in The Wall Street Awakening.
Oh, really?
I believe that. Because I would think she would be
Well,
very. Yeah. Does
we're-
the book take on that?
Okay.
So because I believe she's a
Yeah,
believer and she would
that's
know what the
right.
Bible would say.
Well, there is a chapter specifically dealing with debt, more from an investment perspective. And debt is usually the type of debt you're talking about from an investment perspective is bonds. A lot of people don't understand that bond is, when you buy a bond, you're actually lending money to a corporation.
Right.
So you're a lender and they're the borrower.
That's something I
So,
just learned
yeah.
because of this series.
That's
Well,
right.
there you go. But first we have to address what support is there. I'd rather go back to the Bible instead of my book on this. And there is no support for debt in the Bible. Just the opposite. The Bible warns us against debt all the way through it, multiple times. There have been, in many discussions I've had with people over the last 30 years about this, there has been an occasion where somebody would come up and say, yeah, but, and we'd have those discussions. The last one was that there was a prophet who actually encouraged somebody to go into debt. And Jason, you remember that story,
That's
don't
right.
you? Yeah.
Right. So the widow was encouraged to go get some vessels from her neighbors and borrow them.
Borrow them so that they could be filled with oil and she could sell it in the market and support herself that way.
Off
So
of
that
borrowing.
was his case to you on why.
On the Bible saying it does support debt. Now, I would say that those are two different totally worlds, that they use one word that really isn't even used in the same way, but he was going to stand on that, so I decided, well, and he just said, you're not taking the Bible literally. If you don't, I said, okay, if we're going to take it literally, then I'll have to say that if a prophet comes to you and tells you to borrow something, like vessels from your neighbor, that you should do it. Otherwise, there is nothing in the Bible that says for us to borrow. In fact, it warns us against that.
Right.
And I think that's something we really need to consider. Now, somebody listening might be saying, you know, oh no, here he goes. He's going to start lecturing about debt and getting into debt and how we can't use debt and, you know, and that kind of stuff. But the reality is, it's not me. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just like everybody else. I fall short from perfection in the ways of God. And I've made many mistakes, including getting way over my head in debt, thinking it was the right way to go in times. But over time, God has shown me in His Word and in reality that there's a reason not to do that it does presume upon the future. We presume we're going to have a good job, our cash flows are going to continue, our stocks are going to go up and we'll be able to pay it off, or all these different, because there's so many different schemes about borrow to invest or, you know, do different things. So,
Right.
you know, but historically I can say in my life and through the lives of my clients and their stories, eventually it hurts you and it causes some problems, as well as you were mentioning the idea of trust.
Right.
With this.
Yeah, because if you're not trusting God to provide for your current and then future, then you're going to want to go out there and try to create it on your own. You know, we need to
Right.
borrow money to buy that second rental property so that we can have some income, as opposed to, you know, maybe that wasn't even the route that God wanted you to go to begin with or whatever.
So I'm laughing because I took a course many, many years ago when I was a teenager, like 100 years ago, you know, on leveraging yourself to being a millionaire. I think it was like Bob Allen or Robert Allen or something. And what you do is first you start with this property, then you leverage that to buy this property, then you leverage that to buy this property.
Yeah.
And by the way, he did that 6 times. He went through 6 bankruptcies.
Wow.
And then he was selling all these seminars on how to make money doing that, you know. So it's almost hilarious that, you know, he failed 6 times eventually. He did make millions of dollars, but he lost it all 6 times because of the debt. You know, that's why I'm saying it's funny to hear that kind of stuff. But no, the Bible does discourage us. There's no support in that book for debt. And in our book, we talk about it a little bit and the lack of trust we have and sometimes the foolishness of it. I would say in my life, some of the debt was foolishness. I did not look deep enough, or, I mean, even getting away from the Bible, it was just foolish borrowing.
Right.
I didn't need it. I shouldn't have done it. It was at the wrong rates. It was at the wrong, you know, it's just craziness.
I have found in our life that I've really seen 2 examples. One is that we feel like we have a need for something and we borrow to get it. And then the other is we feel like we have a need for something and we just wait on the Lord. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And then more often than not, here He comes through with answering
With more
our prayer
or
in an
better
amazing
than we
way.
were expecting.
That's right, and I
Absolutely.
feel like the
Absolutely.
times that we go ahead and take the matter into our own hands, He's still walking with us, but we're just missing out on whatever blessing could have come in the waiting on Him.
Right.
Right.
It's almost like there's 2 paths here. One is the way of the Lord and one is the way of man. And we get to that crossroads and the way of man says, look at this glittering over here.
So
We go,
true.
oh, I need glitter so bad right now. And we go that way. Well, God had a mountain of glitter over here.
Yeah.
You got a handful here, and by the way, you have to give it back over here. You know,
Right.
that's the way it often
So
is. Now,
true.
I'm not saying that it's not hard, that we don't get the lifestyle we want, but we confuse wants with needs, and that's where we often get in trouble with
Yeah.
that. We often borrow for wants, like consumer debt, using a credit card for donuts and all sorts of
Burgers,
stuff that
yeah.
we really don't need.
Right.
And I'm not lecturing, believe me, we're all in this together.
We're
We
all
all
in the middle
fall
of it,
short of the
aren't we?
glory
Yeah.
of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let's take a moment to encourage. No matter where you're at, if you're way in debt or you're just a little in debt, get into the Word. Start seeing what God says about it. And don't be discouraged. Don't worry that it seems like it's going to take forever to get out of debt. I once counseled a person, and we went through a plan to help them get out of debt because it was very dear to them at this point. God had convicted them of their abuse of debt, and they wanted to get out as quickly as possible, and it's going to take 3 to 5 years for them to get out of the consumer debt end of it, just the consumer debt. They said that's like forever, 3 to 5 years. I said, well, what's longer, 3 to 5 years or never?
Wow, yeah.
Because if you continue on the path you're on, you'll never
get
be out of debt.
Right.
And you'll never realize the blessing God has for you. Sometimes it feels to me like I spend a lot of time climbing over all these blessings God wants to throw at me to get to those blessings I think I want.
Wow.
And we spend a lot of time and energy and money
Yeah.
to do so.
I'm going to have to think about all this because this is like hitting home with us in our house.
Right, the big
Plans for the
house.
future.
But we're not
yeah.
lecturing here. Please know we're here to
Yeah.
care and serve. We are not pointing a finger at anybody. We are saying this is God's word. And if it's not God's and it doesn't ring to you, walk away.
Yeah.
If it does, dig into the word. Seek out somebody to help you to move in the direction of trusting God more. There's no condemnation here. We're all just, beggars trying to share where we found bread.
Yeah. The second part of her question was not on the personal level like we just talked about, but she said, what is the biblical support for debt given the huge increase in more U.S. debt from the COVID quarantine compensation? So taking it to a...
Yeah. So my thoughts on that is that we're kind of assuming that the United States is being compared with a Christian entity, which it's not. And so to operate as a Christian would maybe is a stretch. So I guess our expectations maybe shouldn't be that our country that has gone so far from the Christian values shouldn't necessarily say that this next step is bad too. It is bad, sure.
It is our country.
Right, it is our country too, and maybe we could do something about it.
Well, that's really the next step in the logic is it really those guys in Washington's fault? Who elected him? Maybe we should leave it there.
Well, I was going to say, but what about the person who says, hey, I get out there and I vote all the time? What's their position in this situation? They're just kind of hands tied, right?
If they do the right thing and they look for godly men to elect, first of all, then they've done what God called them to do. The direction it goes is up to the Lord himself.
Right. Sure.
And secondly, if there's godly men and women out there, maybe God's calling you to step up and you haven't, to run for office. Who was it that said only thing for evil to win is for good men to do nothing?
Yeah, I've heard that quote before.
I
can't
misquoted
remember.
it, but I think you know what
Sure, the gist of it.
For evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing.
Right.
And I don't want to ever use this as an excuse, but I've read the book and I know where it's going, and so do you. If you've not Wall Street Awakening, the Bible,
Right, the
let's
book.
not confuse it. And as times get on, good would be called bad and bad would be called good, and eventually it won't matter in the sense that there's nothing we can do about it and God will return. But he does call us to do all we can do about it, because when we do step up, people get saved. People come to Christ.
Right. Yeah, there's freedom.
Amen.
Good. Josephina asked, my question is out of curiosity, wondering what is the most common problem Christians have financially that goes against the Bible? We've kind of covered this a little bit.
Sure. So my thoughts, again, are that we're kind of bouncing back between, debt being one of the largest problems, I think. I think it's one of the most crippling problems. Man, I don't know. And then, again, I'd say lack of faith, but I think you would say...
Probably giving.
Giving.
And debt. But I think if we hold those two in our hands and look what is the cause of lack of giving and the cause of debt, it's both lack of faith in God's
Trust.
provision.
It's the same
Yeah.
thing, really.
It really is,
Feeling like
yeah.
we don't have enough.
Right.
We don't have enough to have what we need, so we have to borrow, and
Right.
we don't have enough to give.
Right.
Yeah, yes, I think that's well said. It was said a lot nicer than the words that went through my mind.
Karen, at 64, she says, I am a Christian who needs all the advice you have on investment since I am late at starting. Thanks for doing this, much needed.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I feel the same way about what Julie and Jason are doing going through this book. I would have never thought anybody would care for anything I read enough or it would impact lives like that. So thank you again for that. And also, I'd like to take a moment. We are trying to answer questions here and do so in a way that we are not giving advice. And it's very important we say this. We don't know who you are. We don't know
Right.
where you're at.
Right.
We don't know what your finances look like, what your, what is expected of you in your world and all that kind of stuff. So none of this is advice. It's just information
Right.
to get you started on the path, to seek out a Christian financial advisor. I just want to make sure that people understand it. I think there's a little bit of that is necessary in this question.
Yeah. Do you have any resources on where people can go to find a Christian advisor? I mean,
sure.
obviously they can contact you.
Yeah.
You're available throughout the whole United States.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
You can
Yeah,
work with anyone?
there's licensing in states, but if you're not licensed in some state, you can't solicit. But if people seek you out,
Right.
Okay.
that kind of
so
thing.
you could help them.
we could
Correct.
to a certain point, and then we have to make sure the license are there.
Right.
But it's never an issue. We're there to help, and if we can't help, we can refer somebody to you. I helped found an organization called the National Association of Christian Financial Consultants 25 years ago, and it was the organization to raise up Christian advisors and to train them in the ways of investing with biblical integrity, because nobody ever heard of that at that point. It was just like 4 of us across the U.S. God called together. And in that group are members all over the U.S. So we may be able to find
Yeah.
somebody
You have all
close
the
to you.
resources
Yeah,
there.
you can go out to nacfc.org and look up an advisor on your own.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you,
Remember the .org, otherwise you're going to get to the
.com, some National Association of Cystic
cystic
Fibrosis.
fibrosis.
Oh boy.
Great organization.
Instead of the National
not-
Association
yeah,
of
Yeah,
Christian
not
that's
Christian
good.
Financial
Financial
That's
Consultants.
good. I can put that link below
.org.
too.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's a Christian who is investing. She's just starting in her 60s.
Yes.
And this is a great place to start with the book, because
Good principle.
there's even a chapter in the book that's really important, and I think you're going to go through that chapter in your next
I
vlog,
can't remember what's coming up next.
which is how to find a Christian investor, or what to look for in a Christian investment
Right.
professional.
Right.
The reason I did that chapter is because there are wolves in sheep's clothing, for one. There are Christians who are pseudo-Christians. There are all sorts of people. It really comes down to, if somebody does not understand your values, and as a Christian, our values should be God's values. If they don't fully understand those values, how can they counsel you in the ways of those values?
Right.
And so we go through it in there on how to do that. And of course, if you're going to go through that next week.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's really her step that she needs to, because without all the details of her information, you
Well,
can't really.
I agree that, I mean, if it makes sense to go ahead and get the book, I mean, you can listen to our sessions here, but ultimately getting the book is going to help you to slow down, take notes, and know
Sure.
what God has put on your heart specifically, because it's a very, very, like I said, it's a very simple read, but the first part of it, again, is preparing you to understand the second half, and we're just kind of jumping into
Right,
the second half.
that's right.
We're going to go through some of our favorite devotionals, just to kind of mention, just to give you an idea what that's like and why it might be important to take the time to go there. But once she's done that, then she's prepared to take the next step, because if she doesn't understand, or if the person that's seeking an advisor, a Christian advisor, if they don't understand what to be looking for, it's going to be easy, because in our industry, sales is pretty common.
So it would be
And
easy
how many
for
times
someone
have
to
we
just-
seen a client come in who said, yeah, my current advisor is a Christian, and he's been advised me, and he says that what I'm doing is biblically aligned, and then we find abortion, pornography,
Right.
Yeah.
anti-family entertainment, immoral lifestyle, companies that promote and profit from immoral lifestyle in their portfolios, and or they've been advised not to give at this time because they don't have enough money, or and I'm not going to say the plans are all wrong, but what I am going to say is they weren't biblically sound.
Yeah.
So there are reasons to seek out someone who is a Christian, not just playing Christian.
Right. Well, you know,
So-
the one for me that's really big is the backpedaling, I'm a Christian advisor now. You know, like, oh, I didn't know you really wanted to do that, as opposed to this is what I do.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Oh, yeah,
This is
I can
who I
put that
am.
hat on.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, yeah, I'm
right.
everything for
Oh, that's
everybody.
so
You know, and I've
true.
seen
Yeah.
that with people that I've talked to, and they're like, oh, well, this guy says
Yeah.
he can do just what you do. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
everybody says that in the industry, and
Because
that,
it's business
yeah,
is what they
and,
want.
and if that was true, I would be on my face flat on the floor praising God about that,
Yeah.
because that's what we really look. That's what the NACSC was formed for, to draw that, and that's why
Godly
other
advisors.
organizations like Ron Blue's organization, Kingdom Advisors, he formed that to do the same thing, and he made it wide to encompass all sorts of people. But there's not a lot out there, but there are great books. You know,
There are.
there's Ron Blue has some great books. Randy Alcorn's one of my favorite authors. Money, Possessions, Eternity, The Treasure Principle, God and Money. These are all great books. Howard Dayton Jr., another great author, Crown Ministries. There's a lot of great reading out there that you can do. But
Why
if
don't you give me the list of those, and we'll put them in the
that's a great
bottom of this
idea.
video.
We
we
could,
could
link to
we
some
could
of your
put a
favorites.
reading.
Yeah, resource.
Yeah,
resource.
send me
Yeah.
those.
But I also want to say reading is great, but please give me some grace right here. Not everybody is supposed to be a car mechanic. I used to love working on cars, and then there came a time where I didn't have time or the knowledge to do so. At one time, I actually was able to write programs. I mean, intricate programs for things like hospital reports and retail stores and membership organizations. I can't do that anymore because I'm too busy doing other things. You have to keep your head in it to do those kind of things. If God didn't call you to be a financial expert, you should seek one out, just like you seek
Yeah.
a doctor out. Most people can take care of most of their illnesses, but most people shouldn't, because they don't spend the time to research it and know what's
Yeah.
truth and what's not. The same thing is true in finances. So there's two parts to being a Christian financial advisor: knowing the Word, not just somebody who is saved by grace through faith, but has studied the Word and understands what it says about finances, and then it's called being wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove. I talk about that in the book. The wise as a serpent is understanding the worldly ways, how money works, how it doesn't, how it hurts you, how it helps you, how investments work, and all the intricacies of this. And then applying it in a way to be gentle as a dove, so that it doesn't harm others, that doesn't harm you, that doesn't cause people to stumble on their way to Christ or in their walk with Christ, and draws you closer at the same time. So both are necessary.
It's good.
That is good.
It is good.
So before we move to the next question, yes or no? It's not too late for her to start in her 60s.
Oh, no,
All right.
never.
Okay, never too late.
Never too late.
Well, if you're going to the funeral home because you're not.
Jason. Never too late. Okay,
I'm in my
moving on.
60s.
that's right. You're just thriving.
Thanks, guys. Is that what you were building over there? A coffin?
No.
He's getting closer. He's in his 40s now. Okay, Cheryl, do you believe in tithing? I pay a tithe to my congregation. I know it's divided up into parts for the worldwide ministry work, contribution for our circuit, local congregational expenses. I guess just the question is that you would comment on tithing in general.
Randy Alcorn calls tithing trading wheels of giving.
Training wheels. Yeah.
That's so good. That's
Yeah,
how I feel about it too.
because in the
Training
Old
wheels.
Testament, speaking to the Hebrews, those people that were called leathernecks or stiff-necked people, he had to lay down these rules, and so he had to break it down for them, and blah, 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 blah. And tithing comes from that. It means 1/10 of your income. It's supposed to be a first
Your
fruits,
increase.
things like that.
Yeah.
But Randy Alcorn, when you get in the New Testament, I think tithe is only used twice, if I remember correctly. And both time it has nothing to do with the teaching on tithing, but going back to explain why we're not under the law or other things like
Yeah.
that at this point in time. Now that alone is going to cause people to click off at this time, but please don't. Please listen, because I'm just stating some things. Randy says that the New Testament, and the word does, I've done the study, says that we are to give hilariously. Now think about that. How do you give hilariously? You give so much that you can't believe
Yeah.
that God has
Yeah.
enabled you to give so much of what He has blessed you with
Right.
that you're in giggles and laughter, and the joy is just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then there's other place in the New Testament, actually in the Gospel, in the Gospels, where he says, leave your tithe on the steps if you've offended somebody and go back and reconcile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of little things in there. But what I would like to say is it is very true in my life from what I've seen. When I give with abandonment, joyously, not regretting it, I am joyful. I feel the joy of the Lord. Chariots of fire. Why do you run? Why do you remember that? He says, I feel the pleasure of the Lord when I run. So I want to run at my best. Well, he wants all of us to run at our best at giving, because we are conduits of his blessings to others, as you have been, as others have been to you. If everybody gave hilariously to one another, who would be without?
Yes.
You know, but it goes deeper than that. It's a spiritual thing. It's one of those things we talked about with debt and giving,
Faith.
the trust, the faith.
Yeah.
When we learn to trust God that he will provide our perfect life, wants, or our perfect needs, not all our wants, when we trust that those perfect needs are better than our wants because they draw us closer to God, we feel more joy and peace in our life. Things money can't buy.
Yes. That's
Things
right.
that, I know a lot of people say they take money over joy and peace any day. For what reason? If you're going to live a miserable life and wealth, why would you want to do that if you could have joy and peace and maybe even possibly wealth?
One
if
of my
God so
favorite
desires.
kids' books that I like to read to the kids is this king who's just never happy. He's miserable. He has everything money could buy, and through the course of the book, he gives away all of his possessions until he is completely poor. And he says, I have so much joy. I've never been so rich. And you just see the progression of him. You know,
Yeah.
he gives away that first item, and he doesn't even smile. The second item, a little smile comes. And it's like
That's
the
great.
more that they go through the book, the more joy
That's
he gets.
awesome.
And it's just,
And
I
it does
agree.
hurt at first because we create this world what we think is right for us and that we need. It's almost like it's not like, it is addiction. We get addicted to lifestyle. We get addicted to all this stuff. And all this stuff does the same thing that drugs do when you get addicted to them. They start off, hey man, you want to have some fun? Come on, let's do this. And you have a little bit of fun, but there's a song, and it's a reggae song. I think it's called No No No.
That's appropriate.
Yeah, guy offers him some reefer, and he says, no, 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 I don't want it anymore. I'm tired of waking up on the floor, and it makes it hard for me to find the door. And it's just a maturity thing that happens. No, 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 I don't want cocaine no more. And it comes down to eventually those things we think we need that are only short-term things that either numb us to make us think we're being joyful, or knock us out to keep us from feeling the pain, never really do help us.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. They eventually kill us. That's why there's heroin deaths. That's why there's cocaine death. That's why there's so many problems with that kind of stuff. Well, the same thing happens with our joy and our peace, from trusting in materialism instead of trusting in God. And there's only one cure for the addiction to materialism. You know what it is?
Giving.
Giving.
Yeah.
Trusting God and giving. Hilarious.
Sure.
Yeah, that's good. That's the opposite.
Well, that was what the rich young ruler had, right? That his addiction was that he had all these nice things, and that's why Jesus told him to get rid of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was the one thing he idolized.
Right. He was addicted to it, and he had put it before the Lord.
God. Right.
Yeah. All right, Sylvia. How has the current social climate affected investing? Keeping in mind biblical prophecy and current events.
That's really good. That's a tough question, and
It is.
thank you for asking it. And let me, if you don't mind, I'll try and address that. First of all, this is not investment advice. It's just general ideas and concepts. The current social is built upon the past. Investing has always been like going into a jungle. A lot of people are told investing is easy, investing is simple, no problems, don't worry about it. Anybody selling a book on investing techniques usually uses that. Anybody can do this. Anybody can be a billionaire, that kind of stuff. But really, they make it sound like, you're just going to go to a petting zoo and all it's going to be nice. But the reality is you're entering a jungle. When you go into the stock market, you are going up against King Kongs, people who have billions of dollars who are manipulating the markets day in and day out, people who have no desire or care for people's lives or livelihoods.
Or what's right or wrong.
Or what's right or wrong. It all comes down to how much of your gold can I take from you, and I'm 40 stories bigger than you and 1,000,000 times richer than you, and I can lose $1 million today just to make sure I take your $50 tomorrow because I'll make it back another day. You are going into a jungle. This is not new. And I'm saying this because, yes, lots of people have made money in the markets, and yes, there are ways to invest that are simple, or easy, I should say, but they're not simple. Those people who are behind those funds that are managing them well, they are spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in research to pick those things to put in your portfolios. I always tell people anybody can manage money like I do if they're willing to spend 40 to 60 hours a week and tens of thousands of dollars a year researching what they're doing. And I'll go one step further. There are some people who could do what I do without doing any of that and just throwing a dart against the wall. There are times in the market where that is possible.
Right.
I'm not going to circumvent that, people win the lottery, but that's not investing. That's chance.
Right.
So the social climate right now, I believe the markets have got even crazier. And I think there were, if you think about, wow, I could stay on this for hours.
We were just talking about this yesterday.
Yeah. In the stock market, in the U.S. stock market, there's been a compression in offerings. We have substantially less stocks to invest in now than we had 10 years ago. And because of that, it's run the price of the stocks up just from supply and demand on that end. Then we have everybody in the market is in the market now. Everybody, where in the 50s and 60s, it was less than 20% of Americans, of adult Americans, were in the stock market. Then in the 70s, the IRAs came in and some other investment vehicles, which increased more exposure to more people. And then in the 80s, we had a Reform Act on pensions, which took defined benefit plans, defined pensions, and changed them into 401ks. So almost anybody who was working got involved in the markets. So it's caused a lot of money to go in, and with less places for it to go, and that causes greater volatility. And it's not. If somebody tells you, hey, come on into the jungle, the water's fine, just remember there's piranhas, there's snakes, there's Godzillas, there's lions, there's tigers, there's bears. Don't listen to them. If you're going to go into the jungle, get prepared or take a guide.
Right. So you would say if people were choosing to invest right now in the way that the social climate is currently, go for it. Just have an experienced person walking with you.
Right. And you don't necessarily have to be an experienced person. Find one. Find one who really knows what they're talking about. And please forgive me if somebody's going to get offended, but everybody who has a license is not an experienced investor.
Yeah.
Everybody who says they manage money doesn't know what they're doing. Make sure they do. Make sure that they're not just a salesperson that sells investments.
Right.
But if they're selling investments and they've never been trained in money management, make sure they have managers who manage it for them, and they're selling you that manager's stuff.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a great
really
answer.
And for those of you listening who have faith in Jesus Christ, make sure they're a Christian who truly understands the Bible
That's right.
and the principles
That's
of money
number one.
therein.
Okay, Asked Us says, I'm looking into finding more information on investing for retirement. So just resource, I guess.
Great goal. Yeah. Looking for more information on investing for retirement. Again, that's a great question, and I'm glad you're asking that question. I don't know where you're at in your cycle of life, if you're just starting working, if you're way down the road.
This is a younger mom. I know
A younger
this
mom.
one.
Yeah,
Great.
in Michigan.
Best time to be asking these questions and the best time to start taking actions at the same time. Resources for preparing for retirement. Let's talk a little bit about financial planning, can we?
Yes. Please.
Okay. I've been through a lot of training on financial planning. I actually created a financial planning system myself, and from a biblical perspective. And one of the things, and I have a great friend who created their own as well, and it's excellent. Hopefully someday he's going to publish this because I love it. But anyway, what I'm talking about here is that there's biblical perspective on things and there's worldly. You know, the worldly perspective is earn all you can, put it in a can, sit on the can. And then here's what you got to do to make sure it works. Well, that negates God's possible side roads of caring for your neighbor, giving, and so many other things. You know, we have to be flexible because this isn't ours, it's God's. God's word's very clear that he owns everything. He created everything. He even created the physics of money. So he knows how it works, you know. So what we have to do is do the best we can with what he has given us, and then realize we'll have the life he wants for us when we get there. Sounds flippant, doesn't it? But it's not. If you're doing the best you can as often as you can, you'll end up where you need to be.
Right.
If on the other hand you don't prepare, then you may be giving away blessings or missing blessings that God has for you now and in the future. So a financial plan is the beginning of that, and it should be planning with the flexibility to respond to God's calling in your heart.
That's good.
Yeah, but yes, start planning now. If you can and put money away, put it away. Be careful about putting it away and making it an idol. I have known people, here, I'll give a fictitious illustration. Imagine your neighbor lost their jobs and they can't pay for their mortgage anymore. They have children, they're going to lose their house, they've already had the car repossessed, they don't know what to do, and you have a retirement plan and you want to help them, but you've already set that retirement, that's for your retirement.
Wow.
Really? Is it? Is that what God, maybe he had you put that money away just so you could rescue your neighbors till they get back on their feet. I'm not saying you need to do that. I'm just saying listen to God's pull on your heart. Listen to his tug on your heart and your mind. If God wanted every penny that you put away for a mission of his to allow you to participate in his great works, would you really want to miss that because you're worried about something 20 years ago that God could take care of in a blink of an eye?
Yeah, that's so good. So plan, but hold it loosely.
Yeah.
Save, hold it loosely.
Yeah, there was a modern day prophet, musician, I forget what the name of, 59 Special or something, 38 Special. It was a rock band, it wasn't a prophet. Hold on loosely was the name of the song.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the same thing with love. You know, you don't make people love you. You care and you serve them, and you hold on loosely. You have to respect and care for their life and realize it's not always going to make up with yours. Yeah. And if you allow them to love you, then the love grows. I believe because we're trusting God for their lives and ours. He didn't call me to dictate to my wife how she should live. That's between her and God.
Right.
Even in those verses in the Bible about husband and wife, it doesn't say husband, make your wife do this. Wives, make your husbands do this. It says just the opposite. It says wives, you are to do this. Husbands, you are to do this. Not whether your wife does this or not.
Right.
You're to do this no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, and the same thing's true with finances. When it comes to finances, trust God first. We're always getting back to that trust.
Yes.
aren't we?
Right.
That's right.
Trust God first, and plan, but be ready for the tugs on your
Respond.
heart.
I think it's like responding. So there's the plan, but then you'd respond to the Holy Spirit, right?
Well, yeah.
And I think again, this
It was a previous recording. We talked about that.
Yeah. But go ahead.
A.W. Tozer, in his book, The Pursuit of God, talks about the difference between normal Christians and today's Christians who are, I guess, a little bit below normal in his opinion, but and the great Christians in the Bible, those who seem to walk in this bubble of the Holy Spirit and peace and righteousness. And he says it's not their character because they were all different. It's not them. It is something different. What did they have in common? And the one thing he said they all had in common was that when they felt that tug a little tug on their heart from God. They just didn't ignore it or go on with life. They responded.
Yeah.
They took action. When they got the whisper in the ear from the Holy Spirit to sit and hold their wife's hand, they just didn't ignore it. They went over and held their wife's hand. When God called, when you felt like you needed to go and share some truth about God to somebody who was on the street, to do that. I can give you one in my life, and it's changed my life. I was in Atlanta, and I was with some friends. One of them is a great friend in the NACSC, Alan Ross. By the way, he's speaking next Thursday at the annual conference, which is online and going to be free for everybody.
Oh, how incredible.
4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. No, Standard Time, right?
Standard Time.
Can I put that information in the
Sure.
description box?
Sure,
before you-
absolutely. Little bit of promotion there. But I was down there with Alan, and we were crossing the street, and there was a beggar there. And the beggar said, hey, man, can you give me a little money? I said, in my wise wisdom, what are you going to use it for? He says, I'm not going to lie, I'll probably eat on a little bit of it and buy a bottle of wine. So I appreciate you being real with me. And I walked away. And I was reading the Word, and God's Word says, if someone asks, give. It doesn't say ask them questions. And so I was talking to Joe Boatwright, who is a pastor who's on the board of directors of the Timothy Plan, mutual funds. By the way, again, not a promotion for Timothy Plan, just explaining who this gentleman
Get it
is.
all out there.
He's financially wise, and he's a pastor, a
Yeah.
great pastor. And he's Italian, so the way he talks
Passionate.
about all of it is great. And he says, well, let me tell you, Mark, what you should have done. He says, I was in Philadelphia, I think it was, or New York, and this homeless guy came up to me and said, hey, man, can you spare some money? He said, well, absolutely. And I reached in my wallet, pulled out a 20, and I started to hand it to him, but I didn't let go. And when he grabbed it, I said, but let me share this with you. This isn't my money. This is God's money. And he put me here for this purpose, to give you this money. And I know he would prefer you use it in a way that glorifies him. Maybe it's to feed you or your family or something. But that's between you and God. Can I pray for you? And in his Italian accent, which I'm not going to do, he says, Heavenly Father, I pray for this man, that you pull him close, that you bless him, and that he uses this money in a way that blesses him, and if he doesn't, please strike him dead. And when I opened my eyes, he was gone. Now, he was joking about saying, he said, no, I really just gave him the 20 and prayed for him. But, that's the way we should give. You know why? Because it's not ours. We're a conduit of blessings. We are not the owners. We are here to manage those blessings that God gives us to his glory. In our teaching on stewardship, we say, his resources managed his way for his purposes to his glory.
Yeah.
We are stewards, and that's what we should do. How did we get on that story? I'm sorry.
Well, you just have so much to offer.
I want to add to that. The reason, again, is that when you go to get advice about whether you should help your neighbor out or whatever, it depends on the lens of the person that you're seeking advice on what kind of advice you're going to get back.
Oh.
If they're first a Christian and then a financial advisor, they're going to give you God's way. If they're a financial advisor and they happen to be a Christian, they're probably going to say, well, you are behind on saving, you're 60 whatever, and you probably shouldn't, whatever. So,
I've heard many clients now that are clients that came in and said, well, my advisor said I need to do this, this, and this, and we're feeling convicted that we're not giving. He said we couldn't afford to give, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I would say that, and this is important to think about, from a worldly perspective, that was prudent. If I didn't have God,
right.
That was a
Yeah,
prudent
It's a
advice.
logical move. Right.
But I know if I end up in a box in an alleyway at 75 with the Lord, that's better than ending up in a castle without him.
Right.
I talked to someone once who was not a believer, and we were talking about, well, how much do you make to have this many children? And you must, they're trying to figure all this
Yeah,
out.
you guys are rich, aren't you?
Yeah, right. And I just tried to say, well, I guess, I don't even remember how many children we had. It was a while back. And I said, well, really, we actually
You
don't.
lost count on how many children you had.
At the time. And I said, well, really, actually, we don't make enough. Like, when we write it out on paper,
It doesn't
we
work.
don't make enough. They're
Right.
like, well, that doesn't make sense. I was like, but God has supplied our needs
But
to where it
God,
works out.
two words I
He
love.
stretches it.
But
He stretches
God.
it.
Yeah.
And they were
And the
getting
faith-
very frustrated with
Right,
me.
right. But the faithfulness of God will be foolishness for those that are perishing.
That's right.
That's
That's
right.
right.
So,
And
right.
they just couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand to explain to them because I don't know God's ways, but I know that He has always provided for us and always been enough.
Amen. Praise you, Lord. And for those of you who are listening, give God praise. No matter where you're at, no matter what's going on. It doesn't matter if you're in poverty or wealth. God has a desire to bless you and care for you. Just turn to God. Just embrace Him. Allow Him to work in your life.
Amen. Let's see. Sherry. We are interested in putting a little in stocks, but don't know much about it. I would love to hear more on how to get started. So I feel like you've kind of covered this a little bit. Find someone to hold your hand, obviously.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think through what the best approach to this question is, because it is awfully general. It's like, why do you want to invest in stocks?
Right.
Yeah.
First off, and what are you hoping to see come out of that? The first step to investing is understanding why you're doing it. If you don't know where you're headed, any direction will do. So if you're wanting to invest in stocks because you see that there's a lot of potential there, great. Just remember there's a lot of risk as well. Also, if you're already investing in other things in stocks like mutual funds, you're already invested in stocks. You may just not have known it, because what a mutual fund is hundreds, thousands, millions of people put their money together by buying shares of this mutual fund. Then the money managers buy stocks, bonds, real estate investment trusts, or whatever their prospectus says they're going to invest in for you most of the time.
Okay.
So you
get
might be
connected.
there, but if it's just curiosity and you want to learn more, there's so much great resources on the internet. You can go out and there's a Investopedia.
Yeah.
Investopedia is an excellent place to go. You could go out there and just type in how to buy stocks or how to analyze stocks.
What is a
Kind of
mutual
breaks it
fund?
What
down.
is a mutual fund?
Right.
What are the
Great.
different types of stocks?
And it speaks in English too.
Yeah.
Susie is asking, well, this isn't a question, this is just a comment. She's saying that her 14-year-old son has been listening with her to this video series.
Awesome.
I know,
Yes.
that's so great.
And so far he's
So
been
far,
able to
he gets
keep
it.
up. Yeah. Right.
Maybe someday you could do a video on money management for teens.
Okay, so like my quick answer to that, because I wrote this down, is that if we're not explaining this well enough and we lose your 14-year-old at any point in time, we're not doing our job right, because it should
Bingo.
be that simple.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
Yeah,
In
so
fact,
call us out on it is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's good.
in writing the Wall Street Awakening, I would ask people to read parts I was writing, and sometimes I'm like, you said this in there, what's that? And I would go back and purposely either get rid of that,
Yes.
Or rewrite.
and in fact there's a paragraph in there, it's like when I talk about how to analyze a stock, because I start talking about it, I said, but that's a whole nother book.
Yes, right.
Because it's a whole nother library actually.
Yeah.
So we don't get into the deep analysis, but I set some basic structures on what to look at when investing.
Well, that's
in-
what I
in Wall Street
appreciated
Awakening.
about your book is, I'm coming into this with no financial experience. I always say I'm just his wife. I really just didn't have a clue about it, and the book was written in such a way that I'm understanding what it says. And
Sure,
it's like, yes, I'm
Yeah.
getting this.
Yeah.
I had a pastor that I think he was alumni at some college. He taught something there, and he read it. He took the book. He came by. I was somewhere and gave him the book, and he said he'd read it. I said, well, then call me after you read it. I want your input. You obviously have some education, and you love the Lord. And the next morning he called me. He said, I read it. He said, I was just going to read a little bit, but I couldn't put it down, for one. And then secondly, you made it so easy to read. And then I just had to tell him, I didn't do that. God did that. I'm not a writer. It's only by the grace of God. In fact, I was asked, did I really write this book?
Oh,
by a good friend.
oh, how funny.
Is it art?
Yeah. and I had to admit that I plagiarized the Bible for 50% of it. So
That's great.
That's funny. I wanted to mention something to Susie, but it is on my heart to have like relevant scenarios for teens to understand what it looks like to begin to save the principles and stuff like that. So, Lord willing, I mean, that's one of the things our whole team is kind of talking about. What are the next steps? Doing a basic understanding of
Introduction to investing.
Right.
Because I think a lot of
For
teens are
teens,
making
for-
money and
for
just
adults.
spending
Right.
it. Because
Exactly.
I remember when you broke down for the kids one day of what it would look like to accumulate $1 million if you started
compound
as a child.
interest, the magic,
And it seemed so easy the way you
miracle
laid it
of-
out.
Well,
from
there's a
starting
gentleman
as
who
child.
wrote a book on how to make your children millionaires at retirement, and for anybody to do
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
And all it was if you would start funding the Roth IRA at the earliest age possible, and there's ways to do that even when they're not underage of working and stuff.
Right.
There's ways to make that happen.
Yep.
That they would have millions of dollars at retirement.
It is incredible.
tax-free
Tax-free money.
tax-free money.
Yeah.
No,
Millions
and
of
so
it,
I
yeah.
thought that's the kind of stuff that you guys need to get out and share
Sure.
because it really is pretty simple if you're starting.
And it's
early.
available, and it's, like I said, it's not complex. Yeah.
So good job, Susie, of helping your son to start at 14.
And anything we can do, get a hold of us.
Yeah,
Right.
We're
that's
happy to
great.
do it.
Email me questions specifically. We're setting up. I've got a phone appointment with one of the viewers. That's probably the best way to get specific answers.
Yeah, if you go up to Integrity Investors and email us or call us, and especially your son, if he has a lot of questions, that would help us to develop the program.
that's
Right.
true.
Exactly. What is it? Where are you coming from? Because we have stuffyitis sometimes.
Well, I'm
right?
old and he's semi-old, and sometimes we
I'm
forget.
approaching old.
Sometimes we forget what it's like to be a teenager.
Right. Right.
So Karen asked a question that you're probably not going to be able to answer here. It says, with all the issues going on with the economy, I need to know what are the best stocks to invest in.
Yes.
It's an easy answer.
Yes.
It really is. Those that go up.
Yes.
There you go.
No,
Yes.
it's-
Yes.
not to be silly, but that is one we can't answer because everything is constantly changing. For one, we don't know where you're at. We don't know where you're starting from. We don't know how much you need to live on, what amount can be at risk for investing. There's so many things. So we're not trying to. What was the lady's name?
Karen.
Karen, we're not trying to avoid answering this, but that's the type of question you need to have with a financial advisor,
Right.
one-on-one.
Right.
Because and a good financial advisor will speak about 10% of the time and listen the rest. They need to ask you a lot of questions to understand who you are, where you're at, what's important to you. For example, if they don't know you're a believer and you really trust in God and you want to do things God's way for His purposes, including your life, remember you're part of His purpose, then they won't be able to counsel you in that way. So I really suggest you seek out a financial counselor. Now, I don't know where you're at, but go to nacfc.org, look up an advisor there. You could call my office if we can't help you because of your location. We'll help find someone for you.
Right.
No, thank you. That's good. Sherry, what about mutual funds that your workplace is contributed to for your 401k, or in our case, 403b? I get what you're saying with this, but we don't have as much choice with these contributions. Wondering your thoughts on that.
Excellent question. You want to start?
I will, but I'm probably not going anywhere where you're going to go. So that's why we're.
Which may be good.
Right.
You're together.
One of the things that I used to do quite a bit more than I do now was manage 401k plans, and I had a 403b, and you can request the money manager add onto that platform mutual funds that honor God and that are biblically responsible. So just because they may already have their menu planned out doesn't mean that you can't request to add something on that.
That's a good answer. I like that. And to expand on that, they do not have to add a fund just for you.
That's correct.
So they may reject it.
That would be grace.
But oftentimes it happens. For example, I know pastors who have switched total 403Bs because somebody has come into them and said, I want to participate as a pastor in this church, but a friend of mine says that we're investing in pornography, companies that promote abortion, pornography, and other things. and I don't want to invest in those things, and I don't think God wants me to. And their 403 people could not change for them, so they changed 403 providers,
Right.
403B providers. Your few little dollars matter. You know, think about what God says about that kind of stuff, about what does it take to move a mountain.
Right.
You know, a
Mustard
little
seed.
bitty mustard seed.
Right.
And I can tell you, in my life as a money manager, I have seen other money managers that God allowed me to interact with and others interact with who have changed their money management because one or two people said, I'm leaving your fund because you don't do
Wow,
this.
that's awesome.
Yep.
And then they'd call me and say, what am I to do? People are leaving my fund.
Wow.
And I'd say, are you a Christian? Yeah. One of them, it was the funniest thing. I was having a conversation with him at a conference, and just as a Christian manager to manager, and he told me about his mutual fund. I said, great, is it biblically responsible? He said, no, I don't do that. I'm not going to compromise the returns for the money. And it's like, you know, had all these things, and I said, well, first of all, that's a fallacy, but we can talk about that later. I said, what does God want you to do? No, I'm sorry. I said, why not? And he went home that night, or to his room that night, prayed about it, and he called me on his way home and said, when I get back to my office, we're changing to biblical responsibility. I'm a Christian. Why am I encouraging people to invest in things that cause others to stumble? Your question, why not, hit me. I asked myself that all over and over. Why wasn't I following biblical principles?
That's
So
awesome.
just a few dollars or a conversation can change things. You have power. It's not your power. It's God's power.
Yeah.
And he can change people's hearts. Your 403B, if they won't change for you, maybe they'll change the 403B.
Okay, our next question from Cheryl. I love that you're doing this. Will you be listing companies that are safe to invest in?
Thank you, Cheryl, for the feedback. We appreciate you doing that. And Julie and Jason, I feel the same way. You know, thank you for doing all this.
It's been good.
Will we list investments that are clean? There's some issues with that. The first is a clean investment can turn to being a dirty investment overnight.
Right.
You know, they could, for example, a mutual fund could buy in a stock that is involved in pornography in a subsidiary, or a company that I broke my heart just recently started donating to promoting immoral lifestyles, so we had to sell them out of our portfolio.
Right.
And it was just overnight.
Right. It was overnight. For years we've been bragging on them.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
that's
Things like
tough.
that. So it's hard to do that. Things don't change as much as I'm making it sound right now, but if we did that and they changed, how do we get a hold of you? How do we do
Right.
that? Secondly, there's rules and regulations about us mentioning names of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or any investment. That's called giving advice, and it's against the industry rules to give advice without knowing
Who
the
your client
person,
is.
knowing your client,
Right.
clear enough to know if this advice fits their situation.
Right. No blanket statements.
So, here's an alternative to that. Go out to integrityinvestors.com. There's a little thing on there that says screen my portfolio. Put in a list of stocks that you may own or mutual funds. It'll screen it for you.
Right.
Automatically, free, without any
That's
solicitation.
right. I forgot to mention
You know,
that. That's a
you
great
can
resource.
screen. We can't tell you what is clean, but we can tell you if what you have is in alignment with your beliefs or not.
Well, there is alternative investments, meaning like in that same category. So if something comes up dirty,
But in the screener, it doesn't.
it doesn't.
No.
Is
That
that
would
only
be when you
our
talk to
Yeah,
our privilege? Sorry.
that's a
Step
privilege
2.
thing. It's not a privilege, it's a right, because we pay lots of money
Yeah.
to people to do the research on that.
Right.
But and we'd be happy to help you with that.
Right.
But we wouldn't recommend a stock without knowing who you are, where
Right.
you're at in the financial cycle, or your personal life, what's important to you, how'd you get there, and where you really want to be.
Well,
So
one of
we can't just mention those. But Evaluator Services is where we get our data from. You could go out to there. You could go out to NACFC.org, and they also have a screening thing they could help you with. And what's really cool, if coming up very soon, there's a ministry I really love and support. It's called Back to God, B2G, Back to God. And Dexter, in his newsletter, every month he sends out a list of places where, as a consumer, you can shop, which also means as a consumer, they are within your belief system if you so desire and it fits your investment personality.
Oh, that's neat.
That's good. I think just one of the things I wanted to bring up is that I feel like a lot of people just don't know that these sort of things are out there. They've been out there, and it's wonderful because I feel like I'm now starting to see the confluence of all of these people working faithfully in God's kingdom for bringing this knowledge and this work out to the public, and it's just, I think it's a wonderful time right now where we're at in that sense, to be a Christian, to want to be intentional with your money and your time.
That's great to hear it, because it does seem like as times get long, it's becoming more black and white,
Right.
more crystal clear what is the line.
Right.
There may have been a time in the past where it was kind of foggy, but right now God's word seems to be getting clearer and clearer for more and more. And those who oppose God's word are being bolder and bolder. And I think Christians, those who really want to trust the Lord, are starting to step up and ask the right questions.
Yes.
You are asking the right questions.
Amen.
Let's take one more question today. I have never invested in a bond. I'm on the younger side and can handle a longer time before needing my investment money. What do you recommend?
Well, appreciate that. Again, we can't recommend anything that would be given advice. We don't know who you are deep enough to be able to do that. But I would like to touch on some of the items there. First of all, you're young enough and that you say you never invest in a bond. Well, that, and I'm not sure if this is true, but to me that says you're buying into the concept that bonds are for income and stocks are for growth. That's not always true. There are certain times in the cycle of bonds where they are great growth items. Now is not one of those times. No, they're not even good income items right now, But and there are times and special types of stocks that are great income items that pay great dividends. There are a lot of stocks, many stocks right now that are paying better dividends than the bonds do.
Right.
So those are fallacies, and that's part of the complexity about investing. When you say what should you do, you should be going for, anybody who is investing should be going for total return. And what that means is, how do I make the most of what I have without compromising my values, and if possible, by embracing my values and helping others. That's the bottom line on total return. All these other things are sales pitches, either by bondmen, stockmen, REITs, annuity people, all great products for special situations under special time frames. The economy changes, the stock market changes, the disposition of the market changes, the disposition of the bond market changes, the amount of inventories out there change. So it all comes down to realizing all this and adapting to it. There are times in my life as a professional investor where I have seen bonds outperform in growth, not in yield, than stocks. And there are times like now, where I'm seeing many stocks that can outperform bonds in yield. So there's some confusion there. It's not your confusion, I'm sure, but somebody told you that bonds are for safety and income. Oh, and by the way, in 2008, take a look at how everything related to each other. Everything lost money in 2008.
Right.
Bonds dropped, stocks dropped, everything dropped. Well, if there wasn't any relationship, beta was all different, why would that happen? And what we're finding is under black swan situations, there's no discrimination on what loses money.
Right. Right.
I hope that helped, and I'm not trying to dance around. I'm just going to say it's bigger than the question, and I realize we only had so much time. But if you want to go into that more, feel free to write more or contact us.
Yes.
Right.
And we're going to wrap this up for today. I'm going to list all of the resources. You guys mentioned a lot of resources today.
Did we?
She's gonna be,
I'm going to take a bunch of notes and list all of those in the description box so that you can check all of those out. Keep sending your questions. This is wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark, for being with us today.
Thank you.
I truly am honored. I know you don't see that, but I think this is a great thing you two are doing, and I am honored to be here. That God would let me to participate in any way.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
We will see you all next Sunday with another video on this topic. I hope you have a blessed week.